Step out of the car now.
My patient is under anesthesia. I need to go now.
Hands on the hood.
This is a medical emergency.
This is the moment that costs him everything. The badge, the job, the pension he assumed was untouchable, and by the end of it, millions in civil damages he never believed could reach him. Because arrogance doesn't announce itself as a crime, it disguises itself as routine. The officer doesn't see a surgeon, he sees a challenge, a man who won't fold quickly enough, and that, more than the alleged infraction, becomes the real offense. From the first exchange, the power dynamic is set. The officer speaks in commands sharpened to humiliate, short sentences, no explanations, authority stripped of patience. He is not interested in resolution, he is interested in compliance. The doctor stands differently, upright, calm, not submissive. His dignity is not loud, but it is unyielding, and in this encounter, dignity is treated as defiance. This is where the danger begins for the officer's career, because every escalation that follows will be framed not by necessity, but by ego. The doctor explains, again, that a patient is already under anesthesia. This is not a plea, it is a fact, a professional obligation stated plainly. He does not raise his voice, he does not insult, he simply refuses to collapse. The officer's jaw tightens as his authority is questioned, not openly, but implicitly. The subtext is intolerable. You are not the most important person here. And for an officer who equates obedience with respect, that is gasoline. Hands on the hood. It's a command designed to shrink the other man, to reassert dominance, not because the situation requires it, but because the officer's status feels threatened. This is the first irreversible decision. Every 45 seconds in encounters like this, a silent clock ticks on an officer's career, because each unnecessary command builds a record of intent, and intent is what juries understand. The doctor pauses, a calculated pause. He knows what refusing could cost him in the moment, but complying could cost someone else their life. His calmness becomes a weapon the officer doesn't recognize until it's too late. He says the words that shift everything. My patient is under anesthesia. Those words should de-escalate. They should trigger discretion. Instead, they land like an insult. The officer hears it as an excuse. Worse, an attempt to outrank him morally. Bias creeps in quietly here. Not racial slurs, not explicit hatred, but the bias of power, the belief that uniforms override expertise, that street authority trumps surgical urgency. The officer steps closer. Space collapses. His voice drops into something colder, predatory. Step back or you're going in cuffs. That line will be replayed in court because it's not reactive, it's anticipatory, a threat, not a response. This is the second irreversible decision. The doctor exhales. He does not argue. He does not beg. He says the sentence that seals the officer's fate. Do what you think you need to do. It's not surrender, it's exposure. The officer hears permission. The camera records something else entirely. An unshakable man refusing to validate an ego. And here's why this moment is lethal for the officer's career. Force without necessity is indistinguishable from abuse when stripped of context, and context is about to evaporate. The cuffs come out. Metal clicking is not just restraint, it's narrative. Once the cuffs are on, the story writes itself in the public's mind. A surgeon pulled from his duty, a patient waiting, a badge choosing pride over life. The officer doesn't see that yet. He is still riding the adrenaline of control, still mistaking compliance for victory. He turns the doctor towards the vehicle. The doctor doesn't resist. His shoulders stay square, his dignity intact. That calm will haunt the officer later, because calm is credibility, and credibility is poison to arrogance. A dispatcher's voice crackles faintly in the background, a routine radio check, the kind officers barely notice, but today it matters. This is the third danger point,
Because when supervisors hear doctor, hospital, and arrest in the same transmission, protocols awaken. Questions start forming upstream, questions the officer can no longer control. The doctor asks, quietly, if he can make one call, not to a lawyer, to the hospital. The officer refuses. That refusal will cost him years, because it demonstrates intent to obstruct, not justice, but information. The radio chirps again. A pause, a shift. Something subtle but unmistakable changes in the officer's posture. Not fear yet, but awareness. The first crack. "Stand by," the dispatcher says. Those two words carry weight, because somewhere off camera, a supervisor is listening. And for the first time, the officer realizes this encounter may no longer belong to him. The badge doesn't fall all at once. It slips, right here. The supervisor doesn't arrive like a savior. He arrives like an audit. By the time the radio confirms his approach, the officer's certainty has already begun to rot from the inside. His movements slow. Commands lose their sharpness. Authority, once absolute, now feels conditional. This is the moment officers fear, not because they're guilty, but because they're no longer alone with their version of events. The doctor is cuffed, calm, controlled. His silence is not weakness, it is strategy. Every second he says less, the officer says more, and every extra word tightens the noose. This is where careers quietly die. The officer paces, he adjusts his vest, his jaw flexes again, not with rage now, but calculation. He is replaying the encounter in his head, trying to retrofit justification onto actions already taken. It doesn't work, because justification must precede force, not follow it. The danger for the officer has multiplied. What was once a traffic stop has metastasized into a civil rights problem. What was ego is now evidence. The doctor finally speaks, not to argue, but to document. He states his full name, his title, his hospital affiliation. He explains clearly that a surgical team is waiting for him. He does not dramatize, he does not accuse. He narrates facts the way surgeons are trained to. Clean, unemotional, precise. That precision is lethal, because facts don't need volume. The officer interrupts him, too quickly, too defensively. That interruption will be dissected later, frame by frame, word by word. Prosecutors love interruptions. They reveal insecurity. Every 45 seconds, the officer's margin for error shrinks, because once a supervisor is involved, intent matters more than outcome, and intent is leaking through his tone. The supervisor arrives with neutral posture and practiced indifference. He asks one question, the wrong question for the officer. What's going on? Not what did he do, but what's going on? The officer launches into explanation, long, disorganized, defensive. He emphasizes compliance issues, mentions attitude, uses the word refused. The supervisor listens, says nothing. Silence in law enforcement is never neutral. It's diagnostic. The doctor is uncuffed at the supervisor's direction. That single act reframes the entire encounter, because restraints are symbolic. Removing them is an admission, quiet but devastating. This is where the officer's future fractures. The doctor doesn't gloat. He doesn't smirk. He rubs his wrists once and folds his hands calmly in front of him. Dignity intact, weaponized restraint. He explains again, this time to someone who understands liability. A patient, under anesthesia, a surgical clock ticking without him. The supervisor's eyes shift, not to the officer, but to the patrol car camera, to the body cam. Because now the question isn't, was the arrest legal? It's, was it necessary? And necessity is the officer's weakest flank. The supervisor asks why alternatives weren't considered. A warning, an escort, a citation mailed later. The officer has no answer, only explanations. Explanations are what you give when policy is already broken. This is the fourth danger point. Because once a supervisor starts imagining how this looks on the evening news, the officer stops being protected and starts being contained. The doctor is released, not apologized to, but released, and that distinction matters, because apologies imply empathy, releases imply damage control. The officer watches control slip from his hands. He doesn't protest now, he complies. The hierarchy he depended on has turned vertical. The supervisor tells him to step aside. That sentence will echo in his memory for years, because step aside is how institutions separate risk from reputation. The doctor leaves for the hospital with an escort, not out of courtesy, but out of fear. Fear of what happens if this delay becomes fatal. And here is the moment that seals the officer's fate. The supervisor orders a preliminary report before the end of the shift. That never happens unless something is wrong. Every 45 seconds now work against the officer. Bodycam footage is uploading. Internal Affairs will see it unedited. Lawyers will slow it down, freeze it, read between the silences. And they will notice the same thing juries always notice. The doctor never raised his...
By morning, hospital administrators are involved. By afternoon, legal counsel. By evening, the department's risk management team is calculating exposure. This is no longer about policy, it's about money. Civil suits don't care about intent, they care about impact. A delayed surgery, a compromised patient, emotional distress, professional humiliation. Numbers begin forming behind closed doors. 7 figures, maybe more. And criminal liability looms quietly in the background, not for the arrest, but for deprivation of rights under color of law, a statute officers rarely think about until it's their name on the charging document. The officer goes home that night still wearing the uniform, but it already feels borrowed, because arrogance doesn't collapse loudly, it erodes. And in the days that follow, as investigations open and statements are demanded, he will realize too late that the most dangerous moment of his career wasn't the arrest, it was the instant he chose ego over discretion and believed no one would challenge him. The call doesn't come immediately. That's how he knows it's serious. When discipline is fast, it's procedural. When it's slow, it's surgical. The officer is placed on administrative leave, pending review, paid, temporary, neutral language designed to soften a career-ending trajectory. His weapon is surrendered, his access card deactivated, not because he's been judged, but because the institution is insulating itself. This is the 5th danger point, because once an officer is removed from the street, the department has already decided he's a liability. Everything after that is paperwork catching up to reality. Internal Affairs doesn't interrogate him like a suspect. They let him talk. And he does. He explains tone. He explains posture. He explains non-compliance. He insists the doctor was disrespectful, that he felt challenged, that he was maintaining control. They let the video play. Silence fills the room, because video has no loyalty. The footage shows a man in scrubs, calm, measured, informative, a professional stating obligations. And it shows an officer escalating without threat, interrupting, issuing ultimatums, introducing cuffs before necessity. This is where the language of reports collapses under the weight of reality. Words like refused don't survive playback. Words like threatening evaporate. What remains is tone, and tone is everything. The legal team enters next, not to defend him, but to assess damage. Their questions are colder, sharper, less interested in his feelings and more interested in his exposure. They ask if he knew the doctor's profession before the arrest. They ask why discretion wasn't exercised. They ask if he's familiar with civil rights statutes. That last question lands hard, because suddenly this isn't about department policy, it's about federal law. Deprivation of rights under color of authority carries prison time, not theory, not headlines, real sentences. 8 years is whispered in the room, not promised, not threatened, just acknowledged as possible. That number will follow him home.
Meanwhile, the hospital's legal counsel is moving faster, much faster. They document timelines, surgical delays, emotional trauma. They interview staff. They prepare affidavits. The patient survives, but that doesn't save him. Because harm doesn't require death. It requires negligence paired with authority. And the arrest had both. The media finds the story before the department finishes its internal review. A leaked clip, no commentary, just raw footage. The public reaction is immediate and brutal. Not because people hate police, because they recognize arrogance when they see it. Sponsors call the department. City officials demand explanations. The mayor's office asks one question that changes everything. Can we defend this? The answer is no. This is the sixth and final danger point, because once a department admits it can't defend you, it will sacrifice you. The officer is terminated quietly. No press conference, no ceremony, just an email and a final paycheck. His badge is returned in an envelope. He files an appeal. It goes nowhere. Civil court is worse. Depositions strip away bravado. Lawyers replay his words back to him, slowly, methodically. They ask him to explain why he ignored the doctor's warnings, why he escalated, why he refused a phone call. He says, "Officer safety," once. They stop him and ask him to point to the threat. He can't. The settlement negotiations begin in the millions, not because the city wants to admit guilt, but because a jury would punish them harder. The criminal case lingers. Federal prosecutors review, decline, reconsider, delay. Even without charges, the damage is permanent. He will never wear a badge again. Every background check will surface this incident. Every interview will circle back to the video. And the doctor? He returns to work quietly, dignified. His calm preserved him. Because in confrontations powered by ego, the person who refuses to escalate controls the narrative. The officer learns too late what power actually is. It's not volume, it's not commands, it's restraint. And the moment he lost his, everything else followed.